Poised for Exit is a show for business owners who want to achieve a successful exit based on their own terms. Your business exit will likely be the biggest financial transaction of your life, and for most, you'll have one shot at doing it right. The topics and guests we feature and the stories they share will provide valuable ideas and strategies to improve operations and grow enterprise value so you can achieve the best possible exit outcome. Now here's your host, award-winning certified exit planning advisor, Julie Keys.
Welcome everybody to Poised for Exit. Our guest today is a business attorney whose personal story and climb to professional success is one that you're not going to want to miss. But first, we're going to hear from our show sponsors. We'll be right back.
This is Andy Kosamba, president of Calhoun Companies. We understand that selling your business is a big deal. Since 1908, Calhoun Companies has been confidently connecting buyers and sellers. From small family shops to large corporations, our expert brokers walk with you and guide you every step of the way, whether you're looking to retire or simply for a fresh start. If you're curious what your business could sell for, or if you're ready to start the process, head to calhouncompanies.com for a free and confidential consultation. Calhoun Companies, the confident choice for buyers and sellers.
My name is Todd Grau, and I'm the president of the Twin Cities Exit Planning Chapter. If you're a business owner and advisor and want to learn more about the world of exit planning, you're invited to visit the Twin Cities chapter of the Exit Planning Institute. You can expect top-level education delivered by subject matter experts at every monthly meeting. Grow your network and draw from the learning that could be a game changer for your business or your practice. There's no pressure to become a member, so come and see what the buzz is all about. Our meetings are held the second Wednesday of the month, 7:30 to 9 a.m. See the show notes for more information and registration links.
Exiting your business is a big deal, both financially and emotionally. I'm John Marquet, certified exit planning advisor with TrustPoint. We help business owners transition smoothly on their terms. Our focus is on maximizing value, minimizing stress, and giving you confidence in what's next. Whether you're selling or passing the torch, we make the process seamless. Start planning today at trustpointinc.com. That's trustpointinc.com.
Thinking about selling your business in the next few years? Don't wait to start planning. I've seen too many business owners wait too long and regret it. Freedom Financial Partners are financial advisors who specialize in exit planning for business owners, helping you reduce tax surprises, protect what you've built, and quantify how much you need from the sale. Their proven process helps you think beyond your business so you can move forward with clarity and confidence. The longer you wait, the fewer options you may have. Download your free financial readiness assessment today at ffpforme.com/exit. That's ffpforme.com/exit. Hello, Poised for Exit listeners. We are here today with Ailana McIntosh. She is a business and real estate attorney with Hellmuth Johnson. Ailana, welcome to Poised for Exit.
Well, thank you for having me, Julie.
I'm so glad that you could be here. It wasn't that long ago that we actually met. We were at your office and you and I were both on a panel.
Yes, and I got thrown in at the very last minute. I was really glad to have you as the moderator because you make it so easy.
Well, you did so well. And I just thought, God, I got to get this girl on the show.
I appreciate that because actually a little secret is that I really dislike public speaking. So I really appreciate that compliment.
Yeah. Does this qualify though? I don't think this really qualifies as public speaking. But...
Yeah, a little bit. I'd say quasi, but the panel presentation, that was public speaking.
It was, and you did great.
Thank you.
Lots of really good information and good advice, and I loved your angle. And so that's why we're here. So I think our listeners will really appreciate hearing from you. And especially, we got to start out with your story. I do that with my guests on a regular basis so that our listeners can just become a little bit more familiar with who they are as a person and how they got to where they are. So maybe you could just share with us about your remarkable personal story and professional path.
Thanks, Julie. I think it is helpful to learn about my background to understand my deep desire to help entrepreneurs successfully build out and sell their businesses. So I came from a Vietnamese family. I was one of 7 kids that was born in Vietnam, and we immigrated to the United States. All 9 of us, and my parents had a young teenage cousin of mine. So they had 8 kids, and 2 of them when they escaped. And thankfully, we made it here to Minnetonka, Minnesota. I was about 3 years old when we arrived, and they had no assets, money, anything to their name, and they didn't speak any English, but they had a dream. So they started working like double full-time jobs and attending ESL courses for a few years, and they eventually bought into a grocery store that they co-owned with one of my mom's brothers. And at that time, we were all living in a detached garage that had been converted into a two-bedroom, one-bathroom house. So definitely what you call meager beginnings, right? Uh,
Yeah. Wow.
but they have major entrepreneurial spirit. They're very hard workers. They continue to grow and grind, and they finally opened their own restaurants. And eventually, after many years, bought and sold 4 restaurants.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And all
How
of
old
us,
were you then? Were you working in the restaurants?
oh, for sure. Every single one of us were slaves to that restaurant.
That's how it is with restaurants, isn't it?
It's very much like that with restaurants
Yeah.
and, just family businesses, especially when you're coming from very little, right? And
Yes.
so I watched them work really, really hard for so many years. And I learned customer service skills and I learned how to manage cash and I learned how to speak to adults and answer the phone and organization. And so
Wow.
there's a lot that we benefited from that, even though I didn't know it at the time and I disliked having to spend my Friday nights at the restaurant.
Yeah.
But it shaped me into who I am today, for sure.
Yeah.
It now is a fundamental focus of my career, my client service attitude, and my drive to work with other businesses and clients to make sure that they succeed.
Yeah.
So I work with companies from startup to exit and everything in between, nonprofits, financial institutions, you name it, manufacturing facilities, insurance brokers. We work with the gamut. But it's really fun
Well,
for me to watch people start their businesses with a dream and the journey that they take along the way, and I get to be part of it. And then sometimes we get to see them sell their businesses and exit and kind of ride off into the sunset. So that's my
yeah.
favorite part.
Well, and I would think too that your clients really appreciate the fact that you understand what they're going through because you kind of lived it yourself, right? You watched your parents go through it. You were a part of all of that. It was part of your life. I would say that would be the same for me because I grew up in an entrepreneurial home as well. Like that's what we talked about around the dinner table, right? If it wasn't about my mom's business, it was about my dad's business. And
Yeah.
so, it just becomes part of who you are. And that, I think, when you can relate that way and have that kind of empathy with your clients, they know that you care. It isn't just about the transaction. Like you're really helping them because you understand and you have that connectivity.
There's so much truth in that, Julie. I think
Yeah.
people sense your entrepreneurial spirit. They understand where you're coming from and that you can glean all of the hardships that they go through and help them accomplish that goal alongside them.
Yeah. And wanting, of course, not only to protect, right, but also to have them achieve the best outcome. When we talk about exit planning, that really is kind of the bottom line of everything, right? To help them get to the finish line and do so successfully. But, there's a lot of work that goes into that, right? And,
Absolutely.
you mentioned earlier, like some of the types of clients that you work with. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about those clients, like the ones that you have worked with maybe more than others or stories that you have that you could share. And then we could also wrap in, because I know that you're with a very reputable law firm, Hellmuth Johnson, like I said in the show opener, and all the different practice areas. So you've got the advantage of being able to collaborate internally as well as, provide that exceptional service for your clients.
Yes, I appreciate that opportunity to talk about my practice and the law firm. So, I'm a business transaction attorney. I represent business owners in a multitude of areas relating to business transactions that could be real estate, their corporate governance, or mergers and acquisitions. I'm a Minnesota State Bar Association certified real estate attorney. And my goal is to partner with clients in helping them to start, operate, and exit their business in a way that helps them to maximize success while minimizing liability and risk, just like you said.
Mhm.
What's great about the firm that I work for is that it has all of the practice areas to support those clients. We have estate planning attorneys, family law attorneys, we have a cannabis department, we have a litigation department, we have a construction department, and that's both transaction and litigation. We have an employment law department as well.
Yeah.
So when my clients have needs in areas that I don't specialize in, there are other resources within the firm to assist in that regard. So yeah, one of the newest areas of practice these days is cannabis, and it's been very interesting and exciting to work on cannabis transactions. That's an area that is not very well established. And it's obviously very interesting, not only because of the product that it involves, but also because the state of Minnesota is trying to establish rules and they're trying to figure it out as they're going along. So,
Right. And
yeah.
you're trying to keep up with anything that might change, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it changes regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. For sure. Gosh. So, you and I were talking a little bit about some of the clients that you have worked on recently. So maybe there's a story or two that kind of jumps out at you that you'd like to share.
Well, so from a sales perspective, I think that's a majority of your market listeners, right? Is the business owners that are poised for exit or to sell. I have been recently working on a transaction for a client that is very small. The business owner is a solo and he has a really wonderful employee that he wanted to transfer some ownership interest to. And it was a small percent, but I think he is thinking about succession planning. He was represented by counsel in a different state, even though his business is here, but he has two businesses. They're both here in Minnesota. And as I dug in and tried to assist with my client, the employee's review of documents, it became very clear that the corporate documents were in a disarray and that they had not considered the buy-sell provisions. So if you now have multiple owners, how are they going to handle any disputes or succession planning always, you've got to consider what to do in the case of a disability or a death of one of the owners.
Yes.
There's got to be buy-sell provisions in the operating agreement. So this little tiny transaction turned into, and now we need to amend the operating agreement
Oh boy.
because we've got to deal with those situations. And then as I dug deeper, I learned that there was discrepancies on the ownership of the entities. And that was not, it was all due to the owner-seller law firm not quite having things in line. And this little tiny transaction had just kind of drug on for 8 months. And I don't know that the value of the interests that were being transferred were necessarily,
Right.
worth the time and effort and energy that needed to be put into it to clean things up. It's really a good lesson because now the seller owner is thinking, first of all, I'm not really sure I'm so happy with the law firm that I'm working with. And if this was a bigger transaction, if he was trying to sell to, let's say, a private equity firm, oh boy, that would be messy.
Right.
Because, and so the takeaway from that is always contact your attorney from a very early stage, keep in touch with them, make sure that you're keeping your corporate records and everything else in order. Because when you're trying to do a transaction, and if you're on a tight timeline, thankfully we were not in this case, it's going to make things run way smoother if things are in order. And so, yeah, I know I shared that little recent story with you, but it's important, I think, if you're also thinking about it from an efficiency standpoint for legal fees,
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, my client had to be along for the ride as we clean things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we talked about that before the show. I was talking with you about mitigating risk and how important it is for owners to do that, but so many times they're not really proactive in those areas until like something actually happens, and then they're knocking on your door and they want you to try and clean up a mess, which ends up being more expensive than if they would have, had someone come and maybe do some kind of a legal audit, especially if they're preparing for a transition. So for the
Sure.
owners out there who are listening to the show, this is a prime example of the things that Ailana and I are both seeing in the owners that we work with. And I still see either incomplete buy-sell agreements or buy-sell language, or just like ambiguous as heck, right? You
Mhm.
don't really even know what it means. And, when anything's like that, completely open for interpretation, then you really end up where you could have a big mess. So, yeah, we call those in exit planning, that's one of the 5 Ds, right? So, um, when partners have disputes and they either don't have an operating agreement that spells buy sell language
Mhm.
out, or they have it in it, but it's really not helping them at all. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Well,
And
so
it's actually not
yeah,
surprising to see people form their businesses and then they may or may not draft governance documents. They get their registration and their federal tax identification number, they stick them in a drawer and they never look at them again. But
right,
then 20 years down the line, company is worth so much more and they're thinking about getting ready to sell and they don't know where those documents are.
right.
Um, and so, and we know when they finally pull them out and dust them off, they realize, oh, we've got some work to do here.
Yes, I know. Kyle, that reminds me kind of a client I had several years ago who needed to sell their business. It was a C Corp, and the founder of the company had had a stroke, and so he was not lucid every day, and more less than more, right? So the his wife had to try and figure out, okay, well, first of all, what bank did we have the stock certificates kept in? And secondly, where is the key to the safe deposit box? So
Oh boy.
it was it was a real issue, right? I mean, it was, yeah, on top of all kinds of other things. So yeah, those are just the things that we try to get our clients to safeguard against by the advice we give them, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. A little bit about AI, and you don't have to comment on it a lot, but I am bringing this up in conversation more often lately, just because I'm curious to find out, from an advisor's perspective. You've got some clients maybe that are implementing it, maybe they're not, but I feel like it's going to be a factor that either depletes or drives value in businesses going forward. Obviously, if effective and efficient, that obviously is going to be like, structural, but let's just assume that, we're dealing with, and we will be in the future, we're dealing with that. What have you seen any kind of impact to M&A deals thus far when it comes to AI?
That is like the hot topic right now, of course. Everybody wants to talk
Yeah,
about AI.
yeah.
It's involved in M&A transactions in that companies that have figured out how to implement efficiencies in technology may be worth more than those that are not, or they may be more appealing to those that than excuse me, let me start over. Or they may be more appealing to buyers than
Mhm.
those companies that are not implementing it in a good way. But also with that, you got to start thinking about cybersecurity risks and other things that can come along with an open AI, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it replaces good management teams in transaction value, but it definitely is something that factors into transaction value when it's done right.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that with the clients that I've worked with, especially in the last year, me and my team have really been more intentional about the conversations we have when it comes to AI, because you certainly don't need it to be like a patchwork approach, because that isn't going to work. And just because you implement it doesn't mean that it makes you more profitable or efficient. It has to have like a plan, and it has to be, like I said, intentional, so that you can help your team do higher level things and maybe get rid of some of the manual tasks that they're doing. So yeah, I guess we'll just wait and see, and continue to experiment. But the closed-ended, closed-looped, customized AI seems to be the best option for companies, right? So that no one else has access to it. However, what we've learned with clients as we have implemented and helped them implement is it's only going to be as good as your data. So if your data is outdated, or is inaccurate, or isn't assembled properly or recorded properly, then or stored properly, then it's going to make it harder then for you to actually implement AI and have it be a good strategy. So
Yeah, that's a
I
good
think,
point.
yeah, I think, for you, I just think that you're going to be seeing it more and more. So, this might be a good conversation for us to have in 6 to 12 months and see what's happened since then when it
Hmm.
comes to values. But aside from that, what I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit is with the clients that you are working with and have worked with who are going through transactions, because I know not everything you do is M&A related, but a lot of it is. And I would like to have our listeners hear from you on what would you say are like pitfalls that are common? Like, we kind of alluded to that before with some other things, but like you're seeing it a lot. And boy, if there was some proactive work here, right, we could have mitigated these risks. But what are some of the things that happen, it seems, regardless of their stage, but especially when it's an M&A situation?
I mean, we've probably talked about this a little bit too in our panel discussion because I think it's just such a huge consideration is just making sure that you have the right professional team. Can I start
Yeah,
there? Because it is such a huge consideration. I think that what's important is that you have the right team of professionals that you're working with if you're going to enter into an M&A transaction.
mm,
All too often you see somebody who says, yeah, I've got this CPA that I've worked with, over the years, and they just do my books, and I think that they can help. That's not necessarily the best person for you in a transaction of this magnitude or of this type.
I agree.
And same with attorneys. Oftentimes you'll see one side try to use an attorney that does their general family matters or their estate planning matters or something that is not really M&A focused. And
Mhm.
even if it's just a general business attorney who doesn't do a lot of mergers and acquisitions work.
Sure.
And, it's really challenging to try to get them up to speed or to get good representation when you're handling a sophisticated M&A deal and good consultants such as yourself. I think that if somebody brings in Julie Keys on the very front end and they're going through your entire exercise, they're way more likely to be ready when they receive that first LOI or that first offer. So I think building the right team very early on is extremely important, and do it early on because it's very time consuming to try to negotiate a sale of your business while you're trying to operate your business and while you're trying to keep it either steady or grow it for a high value. So I think oftentimes the wrong professionals is a mistake I see often. And then
Mm,
I think people are not giving enough consideration sometimes to how they're going to handle employee transitions. That gets to be very clunky and challenging. I understand that. And a lot of times sellers are trying to handle negotiations and the purchase and sale process, excuse me, without informing their staff, which makes a lot of sense. But it's really challenging to do that, especially if some of the staff are key management team people that need to stay on board because they're part of the appeal to the buyer. So
right.
trying to come up with a transition plan is at a very early stage is imperative. Um, and there's a lot that goes along with that transition of employees, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
especially if you have a big workforce. How are we dealing with benefit plans? How are we going to deal with employment cutoff dates and payroll checks and all of that stuff? So that's definitely something to talk to professionals about. Maybe it's your plan administrator needs to be brought in at a very early stage so that you can
Yeah.
understand what your obligations are with respect to notice periods and all of that stuff. So that's a big piece. I would say employment is a
Mm,
big piece. And then corporate records, making sure that your corporate records are, as we talked about earlier,
mhm.
up to date, current, makes sense. What the true ownership is. You don't want to find out at the 11th hour that there is some kind of ownership interest in some entity that
Right.
nobody is aware of, or that has been dissolved, or whatever the
Right.
case might be.
Mhm.
It's good to look at those things early so that you can solve for it, or contact the minority owners and make sure that you're giving them proper notice and that they're along for the ride and willing to sell.
And sometimes they're not. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's another topic for another episode, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. The Texas shootout, I think, is what they call that, isn't it? When you've got a minority owner, and I don't know. Anyway, so
Well,
this,
sometimes your governance documents will have what you call a drag along right.
sure.
If you're going to sell and you're a majority owner, does
Yeah.
your corporate governance documents have a drag along right that can allow you to force those minority owners to also sell?
Well, this has been great. Ailana, I really appreciate you being on the show. Lots of really great advice, great stories as we expected, and we'll have to have you back again. So appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. That was really enjoyable, and hope to be on a future show.
Absolutely. And thanks also, of course, to all of our listeners from across the country. We really appreciate that. It's amazing to me how much the show has grown. We're heading into we're going to be 6 years old in June. So pretty
Wow.
amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Well, a
Yeah.
weekly show that's 6 years old. And we couldn't-
Congratulations.
thanks. Well, and we couldn't have done it without the great guests that we have like you, without the sponsors who support the show, and without the listeners, of course. So it's really not about me. I'm just the host, and I'm just happy to be here. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ailana, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Julie.